Okay, so what just happened there? Um, Basically, when you're every frame, when you're moving around, game checks for physics entities, which are just things around you. So obviously, world spawn, monsters, funk pushables, funk doors, stuff that basically stuff you can collide with. And it does, I think it does a 256 plus or minus from your origin. It just checks in a big box. It constructs a list of these physics entities every frame. Now, things that you should know, there's a player move struct that basically has stuff like on ground. This is not the flag for on ground. This is the on ground, which actually is an index of this physics entities list or an array. Uh, so if it's 0, it'll be pointing towards world spawn. If it's, if say you're on a monster, it might be another value. It might be 2. It might be like, it might be 18, right? So it's basically just pointing to an index in this list. This is the number of physics entity in the list, and of course the list itself is included in this player move thing. This also has stuff like water level, origin, velocity, forward move, side move. All that stuff is in here. And then there's also the player edict. So the edict is another struct, is entvar, since the important one is the ground entity one. This ground entity is the index of the entity that you're standing on. And the edict, the entity dictionary. And the entity dictionary is the big list of all the entities in the map. It could be like triggers, lights, um, including like all the funk doors, all the physics entities, right? Um, so that being said, important thing in the physics entity, each one of these things in the list has an info variable which points towards or is the index of the entity in the edict, not in the physics entity. This is so say it's the func pushable. Say that func pushable is entity 31. This will be 31. And this ground entity is pointing to the 31st index of the edict list. So to give a little bit of an example, um, say so the game runs through, it constructs the physics entity list of stuff you're near. It does some player movement code, say it determines you're on entity or physics entity 2, so it'd be pointing towards the second indice in the list. Say it's like a func pushable. It'll look at that func pushable. It'll look in here. It'll say, okay, physics entity on grounds 2. Look at the info. Say again that entity number is 31. Look at edict 31. Assign that to the ground entity, which is, and the edicts just looks like this. It's a similar thing. It'll have world spawn player, everything else. Um, so when is this an issue? Okay, so say you're going from an area with a high number of physics entities, say 8, and you're standing on 2. You move to a new area. Okay, recalculates the list. Let's say you're near fewer stuff. Let's say 3. Okay, it'll adjust your on ground, right? But these 8, it only did like the first. It only overwrote over the first, 3. Um, there's still all that old data still left in that array. So okay, well that's fine because the on ground gets updated, and you'll never look at anything. You'll never look at it. If you ever get to an area with more stuff, he'll overwrite all that bad data. Well, that's not the case because if you're stuck, much like water level, this on ground entity or this on ground integer doesn't change. So you'll still be pointing towards 2. Okay, that's still fine, but in this case, it'll just be wrong, but it'll still be pointing towards something you're near. Okay, but let's say again, say it's you had like 15, you're standing on entity, I don't know, 11. It updates, goes down to 2, but you're stuck now. Let's say you're stuck. You're going to be on ground. You're pointing to entity 11. There's only 2 physics entities in this list. So now, all this stuff, like later on, only overwrote the first 2. There's a bunch of stuff that's old. So what exactly happens? So it's 11. It'll go to on ground 11. It'll go to that list. It'll go to that old entity or physics entity. It'll get that same info. It'll be the entity number. It'll look in the edict and it'll say that's what you're standing on. And this is all while you're stuck. And the reason this happens is because when you're stuck, basically this is the player movement codes. It does some stuff, and then if it checks if you're stuck, it just boots out. It doesn't do all of this other stuff, categorizing where you are, ducking. So a bunch of stuff gets old. And that's, again, why the water level is preserved when you go to a stuck save. So, to look what's actually happening here, we can go to this this stuck save. So right now, this is pointing towards, this is the entity that, or this is the, you see, this is the on ground here. It's 0, so it's world spawn, right? Because I just went from a save that was on world spawn. This is the number of physics entities. Here, this is the 9. Actually, here I can update the list right here. So this is the 0, the 9, and this is actually the edict number, which is also 0 because world spawn is 0 and list as well. But if I go to this special little save I have, if you can look at, there's the 47 right here. The door, I'm now standing on entity 47. There's some other things you can look at. So this is the on ground, standing on 15. There's 16 physics entities. Up this, so 15. That's what I'm on. That's the on ground, which is pointing towards the 16 physics entity list, and this is the entity 47, which matches up with what BXD HUD entity info shows. So then I go back to my stuck save, and I'm in this tripmine, and suddenly if I hit jump, I get 140 speed. Now where is that coming from? It's just magical speed. I have a jump loop script, so I can just go all the way over there, do a water clip, and it turns out it's actually this entity 47, the funk conveyor. And why do I get speed? Basically, I actually don't really understand. I don't exactly know what's happening here, but the jump gets called for the player. I guess it never checks to see if it's invalid, but yeah, it looks at your ground, looks what you're standing on, the ground entity. It sees that's the, it checks if it's, not null, and then it checks, okay, are you standing on a conveyor? If you are, let's add base velocity to your velocity, and, just keep doing that. So, and the base velocity, just know that earlier in the player movement code, this gets set based on what you're standing on as well. So, basically, that's how I'm getting the speed. So, I'm not sure. I'm sure there's more things you can do with this. I tried doing some shenanigans like in reverse where you're trying to load to try and do the conveyor speed anywhere, but the problem with that is I think the edict list gets completely wiped out every single time you load a save or change level, so I'm not exactly certain if that would work. But then again, I know there's some weird edict overflow stuff that can also happen. Maybe that's just the number of edicts. I don't know exactly what's happening there or how those get overwritten, but it'd be cool if you could do conveyor speed anywhere you're stuck. I don't think you can, but there also might be other entity flags that would be interesting to explore. But basically, there's kind of an involved setup here where you need to get stuck, and then you need to find a save that you can stand on the same physics entity index as a physics entity in the stuck save, or that has, okay, the here, I can go back to this. You need to stand on ground on that, or the physics entity list. You need to point towards entity in that is the same entity number, its edict number, as one that you're interested in the stuck save map, or save, I guess. And then you can do funky stuff like jump in a tripmine and gain a bunch of speed because it's technically standing on. Now, how did I even come about this? Well, I was actually looking at this kind of thing. This is kind of not as interesting. Basically, this moving platform, when it's moving, it takes up this huge triggers area. When it's actually standing there, it's actually kind of normal. I assume, I don't know why the mins and maxes get all messed up, but it extends out to here. And then why don't you just die all the time if you're inside of it? Well, because it does an extra check to see if you're actually stuck in something. And apparently corpses consider you stuck, so you die when it tries to move. Um, but that's not how I actually found it. I actually was looking at this. Um, Basically, what just happened there? I just took 400 damage. Well, it wasn't the head crabs. The head crabs did a few 5 damage things. It was actually this fan. And it's not the same. The mins and maxes of this fan are completely fine. You can even put a corpse right here, die from it if you really wanted to, but this is all fine. But I found that this physics entity was, or the head crab was pointing towards this physics entity. Now that I think about it, I don't think I'm stuck, so I'm not exactly certain why it's still pointing towards this. But there's a thing with rotating, or I think push rotate, where it thinks, or if it thinks you're standing on it, it'll just proceed with pushing you, rushing you. And that's how it does damage. Um, but in terms of the tripmine strat, where you can, or the conveyor preservation thing, I think there might be a few areas where this would be useful. Um, but one area I thought of is the dam on an opposing force, but the water movement code in that is kind of weird, where it slows you down a bunch because of the water friction. So I'm not sure if that's like RTA viable, or at least on WAN, or even that water friction might get applied even at a high frame rate. So I don't know. It'd be cool if maybe there's some task stuff, maybe some RTA strats that could be made from this, but it's a little bit above my head. Or it'll take a lot of looking, because just trying to get, if you look at the entity number here, it's 38. It was 47. Entity numbers just change all the time. I don't know exactly how you make them consistent. Um, Obviously, a task could, but I don't know. It's just something. It's a cool little thing, a quirk. Maybe there's more too.